The bullet shattered the saloon window just as Emma Mitchell ducked behind the bar, sending glass shards flying across the worn wooden floor of the Silver Dollar. It was 1879 in Silver Reef, Utah, and she'd never imagined her life would come to this, hiding from the law for a crime she didn't commit. Emma Mitchell, Sheriff Wade Daniels' voice boomed through the broken window. "You've got nowhere to run. Come out peaceable-like and I won't have to drag you out." Emma pressed her back against the bar, her heart hammering against her ribs. The saloon had emptied in seconds when the sheriff and his deputies had ridden up, leaving only the bartender, old Pete, who looked at her with a mixture of pity and fear. "Miss Emma," Pete whispered, crouching next to her, "you'd best go with him. Sheriff Daniels ain't a man to cross." "I didn't do it, Pete," she insisted, her voice trembling despite her determination to remain strong. "I never stole that silver from the mine office. You know I wouldn't." At 23, Emma had spent the last 2 years working as a bookkeeper for the Christie Mining Company, one of the few respectable positions available to a woman in Silver Reef. Her parents had died of fever 3 winters ago, leaving her alone to fend for herself in the booming silver mining town. She'd worked hard to build a respectable life, and now it was crumbling around her. "I'm coming in, Mitchell," the sheriff shouted. The saloon doors swung open with a bang, and heavy boots thumped across the floorboards. Emma closed her eyes, trying to control her breathing. Sheriff Daniels was a business partner of Henry Christie, the mine owner. When $10,000 in silver went missing from the company's safe, it had been all too convenient to blame the female bookkeeper rather than admit there might be corruption within their operation. "Stand up slow, girl." The sheriff's voice was directly above her now. Emma rose to her feet, her chin held high despite her fear. Sheriff Daniels was a tall man with cold eyes and a silver star pinned to his vest. 2 deputies flanked him, their hands resting on their holstered revolvers. "Emma Mitchell, you're under arrest for the theft of $10,000 in silver from the Christie Mining Company," Daniels announced, loud enough for anyone listening outside to hear. "I didn't take anything," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You know that, Sheriff." "Someone's trying to frame me," the sheriff sneered. "Save it for the judge. You'll hang for this, girl. Henry Christie wants to make an example of you." As he reached for her wrists with a pair of iron shackles, the saloon doors swung open again. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the bright sunlight pouring in from the street. "I believe the lady said she didn't do it," came a deep voice, calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of danger. The sheriff turned, his hand moving to his gun. "This ain't your business, stranger. Move along." The man stepped forward into the saloon, and Emma's breath caught. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm-dark sky. Dust from the trail coated his clothes, and a weathered Stetson sat low on his forehead. He wore a gun belt slung low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of men who made their living with their revolvers. "Name's Xavier O'Malley," the stranger said, moving further into the room with the easy grace of a mountain lion. "And I'm making it my business." Sheriff Daniels' eyes narrowed. "O'Malley. I've heard that name. You're that gun hand from Colorado." Emma's heart sank. A gunslinger was the last thing she needed. That would only confirm everyone's suspicions about her guilt. Xavier O'Malley stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly with each deliberate step. "I'm just a cowboy passing through, but I don't take kindly to seeing a lady railroaded." "She's a thief," Daniels spat. "You have proof?" Xavier asked, his tone conversational but his eyes hard as flint. "We don't need to explain ourselves to you," one of the deputies said, shifting nervously. "Actually," Xavier said, "in a town that follows the law you do." He turned to Emma. Miss, do you have representation? Someone to speak for you at trial?" Before Emma could answer, Sheriff Daniels stepped between them. "There won't be a trial. Henry Christie's word is good enough in this town. She'll be locked up until Judge Harmon arrives next week, and then she'll hang." Xavier's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "That's not how the law works, Sheriff. It's how it works in Silver Reef," Daniels snapped. He reached again for Emma's wrists. In one fluid motion, Xavier moved between them. "I can't let you do that." The saloon fell into a tense silence. The sheriff's face reddened with anger, and his deputies' hands hovered over their weapons. "You're interfering with the law, O'Malley," Daniels growled. "That's a hanging offense, too." "Is it the law you're upholding, Sheriff?" Xavier asked quietly. "Or just Henry Christie's interests?" Emma watched the exchange with growing alarm. This stranger was putting his life at risk for her, and she didn't even know why. "Step aside," the sheriff commanded. "No," Xavier replied simply. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun, but Xavier was faster. In a blur of movement, he drew his revolver and had it trained on Daniels before the sheriff could clear his holster. "Now," Xavier said calmly, "I suggest we all take a moment to consider our options. Miss Mitchell here deserves a fair trial. I intend to see that she gets one." The sheriff glared, his hand still on his weapon. "You can't stand against the whole town, O'Malley." "I don't intend to," Xavier replied. "Just against injustice. Now, why don't you tell me what evidence you have against this lady?" Daniel's jaw worked as he considered his options. Finally, he said, "The safe was opened with a key. Only 2 people had keys, Henry Christie and her. The money disappeared on her shift, and she can't account for her whereabouts for the entire evening." "That's not evidence," Xavier pointed out. "That's circumstance." "She also tried to run when we came to question her," one of the deputies added. Emma stepped forward. "I didn't run. I came here to find Pete because he saw me working late that night. He's my alibi." All eyes turned to the bartender, who had been trying to make himself invisible during the confrontation. "Pete," the sheriff demanded. "Is this true?" The old man looked between Emma and the sheriff, fear evident in his rheumy eyes. I don't want no trouble." "Tell them, Pete," Emma pleaded. "You brought me coffee around 8 o'clock. The money was still there then. I was counting it before locking it in the safe." Pete swallowed hard, then nodded. "It's true. I saw her working late. The money was all there, spread out on her desk while she was counting." The sheriff's face darkened. "That doesn't prove she didn't take it after you left." "No," Xavier agreed, "but it doesn't prove she did either. And that's the point. You need proof to arrest someone, especially for a crime that carries a hanging sentence." Sheriff Daniels stared at Xavier for a long moment, calculation in his eyes. Finally, he said, "Fine. She gets a fair trial when Judge Harmon arrives, but she stays in jail until then." "Not necessary," Xavier said. "I'll take responsibility for her. She can stay at the hotel under my watch." "That's not how." "Or," Xavier interrupted, his voice still pleasant but with steel underneath, "we can all ride to the territorial capital and explain to the governor how you're handling justice in Silver Reef. I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about summary executions being planned without proper trials." A muscle twitched in the sheriff's jaw. Everyone in the room knew that the territorial governor had been cracking down on corruption in the mining towns. An investigation was the last thing Daniels and Henry Christie would want. 3 days, the sheriff finally said. "She has 3 days to prove her innocence. After that, she goes to jail until the judge arrives." Xavier nodded. "Fair enough." The sheriff holstered his weapon and gestured to his deputies. As they turned to leave, he looked back at Xavier. "You're making a big mistake, O'Malley. This isn't your town." "Maybe not," Xavier replied, "but right is right no matter where you are." After the lawman left, Emma released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Why did you do that?" she asked, studying the stranger who had just risked his life for her. "You don't even know me." Xavier O'Malley removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. Up close, he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Let's just say I've seen too many people railroaded by corrupt lawmen," he said, placing his hat on the bar. "Besides, a lady like you doesn't strike me as the thieving type." "You can tell that just by looking?" Emma asked skeptically. A smile touched his lips, transforming his hard features. "I've learned to read people. It's kept me alive." Pete brought over 2 glasses of whiskey, setting them on the bar. "On the house," he said. "And I'm sorry, Miss Emma, for hesitating. I was scared." "It's all right, Pete," she said, though the memory of his hesitation stung. She'd thought they were friends. Xavier lifted his glass. "So, Miss Mitchell, tell me about this missing silver." Emma explained how she'd been working late, balancing the mine's books. The silver had been counted and secured in the safe before she left. The next morning, Henry Christie had arrived, found the safe empty, and immediately accused Emma. "The safe wasn't broken into?" Xavier asked. Emma shook her head. "No, that's why they suspect me. Only Mr. Christie and I had keys." "Where do you keep your key?" "In my desk drawer. It's always locked, and I keep that key with me." Xavier considered this. "So someone could have taken your safe key, used it, and returned it without your knowledge?" Emma nodded slowly. "I suppose so, but who would?" She stopped, realization dawning. "The night watchman, Silas. He has keys to all the offices." "Now we're getting somewhere," Xavier said, finishing his whiskey. "Let's go have a talk with this Silas." "Not so fast," Emma said. "Silas is Henry Christie's cousin. He won't talk to us, and accusing him would only make things worse." She studied Xavier thoughtfully. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. O'Malley? What's in it for you?" Xavier's expression grew serious. "6 months ago, I watched a friend hang for a crime he didn't commit. The sheriff in that town was in the pocket of a wealthy rancher, just like your Sheriff Daniels is with Christie. By the time I gathered enough evidence to prove my friend's innocence, it was too late." He met her gaze steadily. "I won't let that happen again." The raw pain in his eyes told Emma he was speaking the truth. This wasn't just about her. It was about redemption for a past he couldn't change. "All right," she said, making a decision. "If we're going to clear my name, we need to start with the mine office. There might be something there that could tell us what really happened." "Lead the way," Xavier said, settling his hat back on his head. "But stay close. I promised to watch you, and I intend to keep that promise." As they stepped out into the bright Utah sunshine, Emma was acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. Silver Reef had grown rapidly since silver was discovered in the sandstone cliffs in '76, swelling from a tiny settlement to a town of nearly 2,000 souls. It was still small enough, however, that gossip spread faster than wildfire. "They all think I did it," Emma murmured as they walked down the dusty main street toward the mine office. "Let them think what they want," Xavier replied. "Truth has a way of coming out." The mine office was a substantial sandstone building at the edge of town, close to the collection of shafts that burrowed into the red cliffs. When they entered, the clerk at the front desk looked up with surprise that quickly turned to suspicion. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Christie said you're not allowed on the premises," he said, rising from his chair. "I'm still an employee until proven guilty," Emma replied with more confidence than she felt. "I need to review the books from that night." The clerk wavered, clearly unsure how to handle the situation, especially with the imposing figure of Xavier standing beside her. "Mr. Christie isn't here," Emma continued. "And I'm not taking anything, just looking. You can watch us if you'd like." After a moment's hesitation, the clerk nodded. "Fine, but be quick about it." Emma led Xavier to her small office at the back of the building. Everything was exactly as she had left it, which struck her as odd. If someone were investigating a theft, wouldn't they have searched her desk? "This doesn't make sense," she said, looking around. "They accuse me of stealing a fortune in silver, but don't even bother to search for evidence." Xavier moved to the window, which overlooked the back of the building and the beginning of the path that led to the mine shafts. "They never intended to find evidence," he said quietly. "They already decided you're guilty." Emma went to her desk and unlocked the drawer. The safe key was still there, untouched. She held it up for Xavier to see. "If I were the thief, wouldn't I have gotten rid of this?" Xavier nodded, then crouched down to examine the lock on her desk drawer. "This has been picked," he said, pointing to small scratches around the keyhole. "Recently, too." Emma's heart raced. "So someone did take my key and returned it to avoid suspicion," Xavier finished. "Let's check the safe." The large iron safe stood in the corner of the main office. Emma approached it with trepidation, aware of the clerk watching their every move. She inserted her key and turned it, hearing the familiar click of the mechanism releasing. "It opens with just your key?" Xavier asked, surprised. Emma shook her head. "No, it requires 2 keys turned simultaneously. Mine and Mr. Christie's." She pointed to the second keyhole. "We always open it together in the morning and evening." Xavier's eyes narrowed. "So the thief needed both keys. If they picked your desk lock for your key, how did they get Christie's?" Before Emma could respond, the office door banged open. Henry Christie strode in, his face purple with rage when he spotted them. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Sheriff Daniels." Xavier stepped forward. "Mr. Christie, I presume? I'm Xavier O'Malley." "The sheriff has given Miss Mitchell 3 days to prove her innocence before he takes her into custody." Christie was a stout man in his 50s, with a thick mustache and expensive clothes that marked him as one of the wealthiest men in town. He glared at Xavier, then at Emma. "This is private property. Get out, both of you, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Where do you keep your safe key, Mr. Christie?" Xavier asked, ignoring the demand. "That's none of your business," Christie snapped. "It becomes my business when an innocent woman is accused of theft," Xavier replied calmly. "The safe requires 2 keys. Miss Mitchell's key was in her desk, though someone picked the lock recently. So I'm wondering how the thief accessed your key." A flicker of unease crossed Christie's face. "I keep my key with me at all times." "Always," Xavier pressed. "You never set it down, never leave it unattended." Christie's face reddened further. "Get out, now." Heavy footsteps announced Sheriff Daniels' arrival. He burst into the office, hand on his gun. "What's going on here?" "These 2 are trespassing," Christie said immediately. "Arrest them." Daniels looked to Xavier, who still stood relaxed but alert. "We had an agreement, O'Malley." "Yes, we did," Xavier replied. 3 days to investigate, that's what we're doing." "Not on private property without permission," Daniels countered. Emma stepped forward. "I work here. I'm simply trying to understand how someone could have stolen the silver without breaking into the safe." "The how is obvious," Christie interjected. "You had a key." "But I couldn't open the safe alone," Emma pointed out. "It needs both keys. So unless you're accusing me of somehow duplicating your key as well, the theft couldn't have happened the way you're suggesting." This logical point caused both Christie and the sheriff to pause. "Perhaps," Xavier said into the silence, "we should all take a step back. Mr. Christie, when exactly did you discover the silver was missing?" Christie hesitated before answering. "Yesterday morning when I came to open the safe. And the silver was placed in the safe the previous evening." "Yes," Christie confirmed. "Miss Mitchell counted it as usual and we locked it away before closing." "So," Xavier continued. Between the evening lockup and morning discovery, someone managed to open a safe that requires two separate keys, remove $10,000 in silver, which would be quite heavy, and disappear without being seen by the night watchman. Sheriff Daniels shifted uncomfortably. When you put it that way, that's exactly what happened, Christie insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Xavier turned to Emma. Miss Mitchell, was there anything unusual about the silver count that night? Emma thought back, trying to recall details through the fog of fear and confusion that had enveloped her since the accusation. Yes, she finally said. The count was off initially. We were expecting a shipment of 10,000, but I only counted 9,500. Mr. Christie said it must be a mistake in the paperwork from the assay office. Christie's face had gone pale. That's not relevant. I think it might be, Xavier said. Sheriff, I suggest you send a telegram to the Territorial Assay Office and verify the exact amount of silver that was sent to the Christie mine that day. This is ridiculous, Christie blue-eyed. I won't stand for these accusations. No one's accusing you of anything yet, Xavier said mildly. We're just following the evidence. Sheriff Daniels looked between Christie and Xavier, clearly calculating his next move. Finally, he said, I'll send the telegram. In the meantime, you two need to leave the mine office. Fair enough, Xavier conceded. But I'd also like to speak with the night watchman. Silas isn't here, Christie said quickly. He's gone to visit family in Cedar City. Xavier raised an eyebrow. That's convenient. When did he leave? Yesterday afternoon, Christie muttered. After the theft was discovered, Xavier noted. Sheriff, perhaps you should send a telegram to the Cedar City sheriff as well, asking him to detain Silas for questioning. The sheriff hesitated, glancing at Christie. Unless, Xavier added, there's some reason you don't want to find the real thief. I'll send the telegram, Daniels said stiffly. Now get out, both of you. As they left the mine office, Emma felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. You think Silas took the silver? Xavier guided her down the street, away from curious onlookers. I think there's more to this story than a simple theft. The missing $500, Silas leaving town immediately after the discovery. And Christie's reaction when you mentioned the discrepancy. He's hiding something. But why frame me? Emma asked, genuinely perplexed. That's what we need to find out, Xavier said. In the meantime, let's get you settled at the hotel. It's been a long day and tomorrow will be even longer. The Silver Reef Hotel was the finest establishment in town, a 3-story building with actual glass windows and a restaurant that served more than just beans and hardtack. When they entered, the clerk at the desk regarded them with thinly veiled curiosity. We'll need 2 rooms, Xavier said, placing coins on the counter. Adjacent, if possible, the clerk nodded. Yes, sir, 2nd floor, rooms 4 and 5. As they climbed the stairs, Emma said quietly, I can't pay you back for this. Not right away, at least. Xavier smiled. Consider it an investment in justice. In the hallway outside their rooms, Emma paused with her key in hand. Thank you, she said simply. Not many would have done what you did today. Get some rest, Xavier replied. I'll be right next door if you need anything. Inside her room, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the day's events. She'd gone from respected bookkeeper to accused thief to whatever she was now. A woman under the protection of a mysterious cowboy with a fast gun and a sense of justice. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Through the thin walls, she could hear Xavier moving about in the adjoining room. What kind of man risked his life for a stranger? And why did she feel so drawn to him after knowing him for only a day? Morning came with golden light streaming through the curtains. Emma had finally fallen asleep just before dawn, and she woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting why she was in a hotel room instead of her small house on the edge of town. A knock at the door brought reality rushing back. She quickly smoothed her dress and went to answer it. Xavier stood in the hallway, freshly shaven but with shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept no better than she had. "Breakfast," he offered. "We've got a busy day ahead." Over coffee and biscuits in the hotel restaurant, Xavier outlined his plan. "First, we need to find out more about Silas. Someone in town must know something about his sudden departure." "The saloon girls," Emma suggested. "Silas spent most of his free time at the Silver Dollar." "Ruby especially seemed fond of him." Xavier nodded. "Good thinking. After that, we should visit the assay office here in town. Even if the sheriff sends that telegram, I want to see their records myself." "They won't show those to us," Emma pointed out. "The records are confidential." A slow smile spread across Xavier's face. "Leave that to me." After breakfast, they made their way to the Silver Dollar Saloon. Despite the early hour, the establishment was already open, catering to miners coming off the night shift who wanted a drink before heading home. Ruby, a pretty woman in her late 20s with flaming red hair, was wiping down tables when they entered. Her eyes widened at the sight of Emma. "Well, look who's still walking free," she said, not unkindly. "Half the town had bets on you being in jail by now." "Thanks to Mr. O'Malley here, I'm not," Emma replied. "Ruby, we need to talk about Silas." Ruby's expression grew wary. "What about him?" "He left town suddenly yesterday," Xavier said, keeping his voice low. "Right after $10,000 in silver went missing from the mine office." "Silas?" Ruby looked genuinely surprised. "No, that can't be right. He wouldn't steal." She glanced around, then gestured for them to follow her to a quiet corner. "Look, Silas was no saint, but he wasn't a thief. He complained about his cousin Henry all the time, said Henry was cheating the miners, skimming profits." Emma and Xavier exchanged glances. "Did he say how?" Emma asked. Ruby nodded. "Something about the assay reports." Silas said Henry was reporting lower silver content than was actually being mined, pocketing the difference. "But it's just talk, you know. Miners always think the owners are cheating them." "Did Silas ever mention having proof?" Xavier pressed. Ruby's brow furrowed in concentration. "Now that you mention it, he was real excited a few nights ago. Said he finally had something on Henry that would make him do right. I assumed he was drunk." "When was this?" Emma asked. "3 nights ago. The night before the silver went missing," Ruby confirmed. "He was supposed to meet me after his shift yesterday, but he never showed up. Then I heard he'd left town." Xavier leaned forward. "Ruby, did Silas say where he was going if he ever left Silver Reef?" "Cedar City, to his sister's place," Ruby answered. "But he wouldn't just leave without saying goodbye, not unless." "Unless he was in trouble," Xavier finished for her. After thanking Ruby for her help, they stepped back out into the morning sunlight. "So Silas suspected Henry Christie of embezzlement," Emma mused. "That changes everything." "It certainly complicates matters," Xavier agreed. "If Christie is stealing from his own mine, it would explain why he was so quick to accuse you. A perfect scapegoat. But where does the missing silver come in?" Emma wondered. "And why would Silas take it?" Xavier rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Maybe he didn't. Maybe there never was any silver to steal." Emma's eyes widened as she grasped his meaning. "You think Christie fabricated the theft to cover up his own embezzlement?" "It's a theory," Xavier said. "One we need more evidence to prove. Let's visit the assay office." The Territorial Assay Office was a small but official-looking building near the bank. Inside, a bespectacled clerk sat behind a high desk, surrounded by scales, ledgers, and small drawers that presumably contained ore samples. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked. eyeing them suspiciously. Xavier stepped forward, his posture straight, his manner suddenly authoritative. From his pocket, he produced what looked like an official document, though Emma couldn't see it clearly. "Xavier O'Malley, Special Investigator for the Territorial Governor's Office," he said crisply. "I'm reviewing mining output records as part of an audit." The clerk blinked in surprise. "I wasn't informed of any audit." "That's the point of a surprise audit," Xavier replied smoothly. "I need to see the records for the Christie Mining Company for the past 3 months." The clerk hesitated. "I should really check with Sir," Xavier interrupted, his voice hardening. "Obstruction of a governmental audit is a serious offense. I'd hate to include that in my report to the governor." This threat had the desired effect. The clerk hurriedly pulled several ledgers from a shelf behind him and placed them on the desk. "Here you are, sir. Is there anything specific you're looking for?" "Just routine verification," Xavier said, opening the first ledger. "We won't be long." As the clerk returned to his other duties, Emma leaned close to Xavier. "Special investigator," she whispered. "That's a bold lie." The corner of Xavier's mouth quirked up. "Who says it's a lie? I am investigating and I am special." Despite the gravity of their situation, Emma found herself smiling. There was something about Xavier O'Malley that made her feel safe, even as they risked everything. They spent the next hour poring over the ledgers, comparing the assay office's records with what Emma remembered from the mine's books. Gradually, a pattern emerged. "Look at this," Emma whispered, pointing to a column of figures. The assay office recorded the Christie mine's output at consistently higher grades than what was recorded in our books. Xavier nodded. "And not just by a little. Some of these discrepancies represent thousands of dollars in value." "So Henry Christie was definitely embezzling," Emma concluded. "But that still doesn't explain the missing silver or why he accused me." "I think I know," Xavier said, flipping back through the pages. "Look at the dates. The embezzlement has been going on for months, but the amounts were relatively small, easy to disguise. Then suddenly, 3 days ago, there's this massive shipment worth over $15,000 according to the assay office. But our books only showed 10,000, Emma gasped. "That's a $5,000 discrepancy." "A discrepancy that would be hard to hide," Xavier agreed. "Especially if someone was already suspicious and watching closely." "Like Silas," Emma said, the pieces falling into place. "He must have seen the real assay report somehow, realized the extent of the embezzlement, and confronted Henry." "Which would explain why Henry suddenly discovered a theft and needed a scapegoat," Xavier finished. "But it doesn't tell us what happened to Silas or the silver that was actually in the safe." They carefully returned the ledgers to the clerk and stepped outside, both deep in thought. "We need to find Silas," Emma said decisively. "He's the key to all of this." "Agreed," Xavier said. "But first, let's see if Sheriff Daniels sent those telegrams as promised." The telegraph office was just down the street. The operator, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, looked up as they entered. "Mr. O'Malley, Miss Mitchell," he greeted them, somewhat nervously. "If you're here about those telegrams the sheriff sent, there's been a reply from Cedar City." "What did it say?" Xavier asked. The operator hesitated. "I really shouldn't." Xavier placed a silver dollar on the counter. "It's important." The man glanced around, then pocketed the coin. "Cedar City reports no sign of Silas Cooper. His sister says she wasn't expecting him and hasn't seen him in months." Emma felt a chill. "He lied about where he was going." "Or never went anywhere at all," Xavier said grimly. "What about the telegram to the Territorial Assay Office?" "No response yet," the operator said. As they left the telegraph office, Xavier's expression was troubled. "I don't like this. If Silas discovered Christie's embezzlement and confronted him?" You think Henry might have harmed him? Emma asked, horrified. I think $10,000 is motive for many things, Xavier replied. We need to be careful. Christie's already tried to frame you for theft. If he's desperate enough, he might do worse. They spent the afternoon questioning people around town, trying to piece together Silas's last known movements. No one had seen him leave Silver Reef, though several people confirmed he'd been on duty the night of the alleged theft. As evening approached, they found themselves back at the Silver Dollar, where Ruby provided another crucial piece of information. I just remembered, she said, lowering her voice. The night Silas was talking about having proof, he mentioned something about the old mine shaft, the abandoned one at the north end of the property. Said it was a good place to keep things safe because no one went there anymore. Xavier and Emma exchanged glances. We need to check that shaft, Emma said. Tonight. It's too dangerous after dark, Xavier protested. The terrain around those shafts is treacherous even in daylight. We don't have a choice, Emma insisted. Tomorrow is our last day before the sheriff takes me into custody. If there's evidence in that shaft, we need to find it now. Xavier reluctantly agreed, and they waited until darkness fell before setting out toward the mines. The night was clear, with a bright three-quarter moon providing enough light to navigate by. They carried a small lantern, keeping it shuttered until they were well away from town. The abandoned shaft was at the northernmost edge of the Christie mining property, a dark rectangle cut into the sandstone cliff. The wooden supports at its entrance were weathered and sagging, warning signs posted to keep people away. Stay close, Xavier murmured, unshuttering the lantern. The yellow light revealed the shaft extending into the earth, rail tracks still in place for the ore carts that had once rumbled through. Do you think it's safe to go in? Emma whispered. Xavier tested one of the support beams, which seemed solid enough despite its appearance. We'll go slowly. The first 20 yards or so should be well supported. Beyond that, we'll have to see. They moved cautiously into the shaft, the temperature dropping noticeably as they left the warm night behind. The air smelled of dust and minerals, with an underlying dampness that suggested groundwater seepage. What exactly are we looking for? Emma asked, her voice echoing slightly. Anything that seems out of place, Xavier replied. If Silas hid evidence here, he wouldn't have gone too deep. The further in, the more dangerous these old shafts become. They had gone perhaps 15 yards when Xavier suddenly stopped, holding up his hand for silence. Emma froze, straining her ears. What is it? She whispered after a moment. I thought I heard something, Xavier said, his voice barely audible. He lowered the lantern, dimming its light further. They stood in tense silence for several long seconds. Then, unmistakably, came the sound of boots on gravel from somewhere ahead of them in the shaft. Xavier immediately extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Emma felt his hand close around her arm, drawing her against the rough wall of the tunnel. His other hand, she knew, would be on his revolver. The footsteps grew closer. Then, a dim light appeared around a slight bend in the shaft ahead, growing stronger as whoever carried it approached. Emma held her breath. Xavier's body was tense beside her, ready to spring into action if necessary. The light rounded the bend, and a figure came into view, a man carrying a small miner's lamp. In the dim illumination, Emma recognized Sheriff Daniels. Before she could react, Xavier's hand tightened on her arm in warning. They remained motionless as the sheriff passed within yards of their position, heading toward the entrance. His face was grim in the lamplight, his expression troubled. Only when the sound of his footsteps had faded completely did Xavier relight their lantern. What was he doing here? Emma whispered. Let's find out, Xavier replied, Moving forward toward the bend in the shaft. Around the corner, the tunnel continued for another 10 yards before ending at a wooden barrier. A newer mining cart sat on the tracks, its contents covered with a tarpaulin. Next to it, the ground had recently been disturbed. Xavier approached the cart first, lifting the edge of the tarp. Beneath it gleamed stacks of silver ingots, their surfaces catching the lantern light. "The missing silver," Emma breathed. Xavier moved to the disturbed earth, crouching to examine it more closely. "This has been dug up and reburied recently." He set down the lantern and began to scrape away the loose soil with his hands. After removing several inches of dirt, his fingers struck something solid. Carefully, he brushed away more soil to reveal the pale gleam of bone. Emma gasped, stepping back. "Stay back," Xavier warned, continuing to clear away dirt until a human hand was visible. "We've found Sela's." The grim discovery confirmed their worst fears. Sela's Cooper hadn't fled town. He'd been murdered and buried in the abandoned mine shaft, along with the silver that had allegedly been stolen. "Sheriff Daniels knows," Emma said, her voice trembling. "That's why he was here. He must be involved in the embezzlement too." "Or he just discovered it," Xavier countered. "Either way, we're in danger. We need to get back to town and send a telegram to the territorial marshal ourselves. This has gone beyond a simple theft accusation." They carefully made their way out of the mine shaft, more cautious than ever. The night seemed darker now, fraught with unseen threats. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. "We'll go straight to the telegraph office," Xavier said as they reached the outskirts of Silver Reef. "With luck, the operator is still there." But luck wasn't with them. As they approached the main street, a voice called out from the darkness. "That's far enough." Sheriff Daniels stepped into view, his revolver drawn and pointed at them. Behind him stood Henry Christie and 2 deputies. "I figured you might go poking around that old shaft," Daniels said, his voice hard. "Couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Xavier moved slightly, positioning himself in front of Emma. "It's over, Sheriff. We found Sela's and the silver. You can't cover this up." "Cover what up?" Christie demanded, his face red even in the dim light. "This woman stole my silver and hid it in that shaft. She probably killed Sela's when he caught her." "That's not going to work," Xavier said calmly. "We've seen the assay office records. We know about the embezzlement." "Sela's discovered what you were doing and confronted you, didn't he, Christie? So you killed him and needed someone to blame for both the missing money and his disappearance." Christie's expression shifted from anger to fear. That's ridiculous, is it?" Xavier countered. "The Territorial Assay Office will confirm the real value of the silver from your mine. The discrepancies will be obvious." Sheriff Daniels glanced at Christie, uncertainty in his eyes. "Henry, what's he talking about?" "He's lying," Christie spluttered. "They're both lying." Xavier took a careful step forward. "Sheriff, think about what you're doing. Are you willing to hang for a man like Christie? Because that's what will happen if you go through with this." Daniels wavered, the revolver in his hand drooping slightly. "I didn't know about any killing," he said, almost to himself. "I just thought." "You thought you were framing an innocent woman for theft," Xavier finished for him. "That's bad enough. But now there's murder involved. Do the right thing, Sheriff." For a long moment, the tableau held Xavier standing protectively before Emma, the sheriff with his wavering gun, Christie with panic growing in his eyes, the deputies looking increasingly uncomfortable. Then Christie made a fatal mistake. "Shoot them," he shouted. "Shoot them both now." Instead of obeying, Sheriff Daniels turned to stare at Christie in shock. In that moment of distraction, Christie grabbed for the sheriff's gun. Everything happened at once. The 2 men struggled, the revolver between them. Xavier pushed Emma to the ground, drawing his own weapon. The deputies, confused by the sudden chaos, reached for their guns. A shot rang out. Sheriff Daniels staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as a dark stain spread across his chest. Christie stood holding the smoking revolver, his expression one of horror at what he'd done. Before he could react further, Xavier's gun barked once. Christie screamed and dropped the revolver, clutching his shoulder where Xavier's bullet had struck. "Don't move," Xavier ordered the deputies, his gun now trained on them. "Place your weapons on the ground slowly." To Emma's relief, they complied, clearly wanting no part in what had become a murder. "Now," Xavier said, "one of you go for the doctor. The other find Judge Wilson. I know he's in town for the mining company litigation. Tell him what's happened here. Go." The deputies hurried away, leaving Xavier and Emma with the wounded men. Sheriff Daniels was breathing shallowly, his life ebbing away despite Emma's attempts to staunch the bleeding with her shawl. "I didn't know about Silas," Daniels gasped. "Christie said just a theft. Easy money." "Save your strength," Emma told him, though she knew it was futile. Christie, his wound painful but not life-threatening, sat in the dirt, all fight gone from him. "He was going to ruin everything," he muttered, almost to himself. "My own cousin. He should have kept his mouth shut." By morning, Silver Reef was in an uproar. Sheriff Daniels had died of his wound before the doctor arrived. Henry Christie, under guard at the doctor's office, had made a full confession, admitting to embezzling from his own mine for years and to killing Silas when his scheme was discovered. Judge Wilson, a stern man with a reputation for fairness, had taken charge of the situation. After hearing Xavier and Emma's account and examining the evidence, he cleared Emma of all charges and ordered the territorial marshal's office to conduct a full investigation of the Christie Mining Company. Emma stood on the hotel porch, watching as Christie was loaded into a wagon for transport to the territorial prison in Salt Lake City. A crowd had gathered, the same people who had been ready to believe the worst of her just days before. "It's over," Xavier said, coming to stand beside her. "Judge Wilson says your reputation is fully restored. The mining company board wants to speak with you about taking over operations until they can send a new manager." Emma turned to look at him, studying the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "I couldn't have done this without you. You risked everything for a stranger." Xavier smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "You weren't a stranger for long." The unspoken question hung between them. Now that the danger had passed, would Xavier O'Malley move on as was the way of men like him? "What will you do now?" Emma asked, her heart beating faster as she awaited his answer. Xavier looked out over the town, then back to her. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there's a reason for me to stay," he said quietly. Emma took a deep breath. "I can think of one. Just one." Xavier's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Maybe two," Emma amended, a smile playing at her lips. Xavier reached out, his calloused fingers gently taking her hand. "I came to Silver Reef by chance," he said. "I was just passing through, looking for nowhere in particular. Now I'm thinking maybe I've found somewhere worth stopping." "Silver Reef does have its charms," Emma said, her voice teasing despite the emotion welling up inside her. "It's not the town I'm thinking of staying for," Xavier replied softly. As the morning sun bathed the red sandstone cliffs in golden light, Xavier O'Malley bent his head and kissed Emma Mitchell for the first time. In that moment, the past few days of fear and danger seemed to fall away, leaving only the promise of something new and precious between them. The weeks that followed were filled with change and renewal for Silver Reef. The territorial marshal's investigation revealed that Henry Christie's embezzlement had been even more extensive than initially suspected. The mining company board, eager to restore their reputation, appointed Emma as temporary manager, impressed by her honesty and knowledge of the operation. Xavier stayed, initially helping Emma navigate the complexities of managing the mine. His experience with various mining operations throughout the West proved invaluable. More importantly, the bond between them deepened with each passing day. By summer's end, Xavier had accepted a permanent position as security manager for the mine, a role that suited his particular talents. He and Emma had settled into a comfortable routine, sharing meals, walks along the red cliffs at sunset, and increasingly their hopes for the future. On a warm September evening, they sat on the porch of Emma's small house, now their home, watching as the stars emerged in the deepening blue sky. "I received a letter from the company board today," Emma said, breaking a comfortable silence. "They've decided to make my position permanent. They're pleased with how production has increased since we implemented the new safety measures." Xavier nodded, pride evident in his expression. "The miners are happier too. Fair wages and safer conditions make for loyal workers." Emma leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible before he came into her life. "We've built something good here, haven't we?" "We have," Xavier agreed. He seemed about to say more, then hesitated. "What is it?" Emma asked, sensing his uncharacteristic nervousness. Xavier shifted to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Emma, I've been thinking about us, about the future." Her heart quickened. "And I never thought I'd stay in one place for long," he said. "After what happened to my friend, I just wandered, trying to find some kind of purpose. Then I found you, or you found me, and suddenly staying put made sense." "It made sense to me too," Emma said softly. Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I want more than just staying put," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I want a life with you, Emma Mitchell. A real life, with a home and a family and all the things I never thought I'd have." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, the man who had stood between her and injustice, who had risked his life to save hers, who had shown her what love truly meant. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xavier O'Malley, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Their wedding took place in October, with the cottonwood trees along the Virgin River turning gold in the autumn light. The entire town turned out for the celebration, the same people who had once believed Emma guilty now cheering for her happiness. Ruby caught the bouquet, winking at Emma as she did so. Pete, the bartender who had hesitated to defend Emma in her time of need, had redeemed himself by becoming one of their staunchest supporters, offering the silver dollar for the reception at no charge. As they danced under the stars, Xavier held Emma close, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought them together. "When I rode into Silver Reef that day," he murmured against her hair, "I never imagined I'd find my future here." "When the sheriff came to arrest me," Emma replied, "I never imagined a handsome cowboy would stand between us and change my life forever." Their life together blossomed as the seasons changed. The following spring brought news that Emma was expecting their first child, a development that filled Xavier with equal parts joy and terror. His own childhood had been difficult, raised by a father who drank too much after his mother's early death. The idea of being responsible for a new life was daunting. "What if I'm not good at it?" he confessed to Emma one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "Being a father, I mean." "You will be," Emma assured him, covering his hand with her own. "You protect what you love, Xavier. It's who you are. Our child will be the most protected, most loved little person in the territory." Their son, Thomas James O'Malley, was born on a cold January morning in 1881. Xavier paced outside the bedroom for hours as the midwife attended to Emma, his usual calm deserting him completely. When at last he was allowed in to see his wife and newborn son, he approached the bed with uncharacteristic hesitation. "He's perfect," Emma said, her face tired but radiant as she held out the small bundle. Xavier gently took his son into his arms, marveling at the tiny features, the perfect little fingers that wrapped instinctively around his own. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "I'm your pa." In that moment, the last pieces of Xavier's wandering heart found their home. The years passed, bringing changes both to the O'Malley family and to Silver Reef. The mines continued to produce, though at a gradually diminishing rate as the richest veins of silver were exhausted. Emma and Xavier managed their finances carefully, investing in land and other ventures, preparing for the day when the silver would run out. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's sharp mind and his father's quiet strength. When he was 3, a sister joined the family, Catherine Rose, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that matched her father's storm-gray gaze. By 1883, the signs of Silver Reef's eventual decline were becoming more apparent. Several smaller mines had closed, and businesses were beginning to look toward other opportunities. Xavier and Emma discussed their options frequently, always with an eye toward what would be best for their children. "We could go to Salt Lake City," Xavier suggested one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Thomas and Catherine play in the yard. "Or maybe California. There are opportunities there." Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. "We could," she agreed, "but I was thinking. What about that land along the Virgin River? The parcel that came up for sale last month. It's good grazing land with plenty of water. We could raise cattle." Xavier raised an eyebrow. "You want to be a rancher's wife?" Emma smiled. "I want to build something that will last, something we can pass on to Thomas and Catherine. The mines won't be here forever, but good land, that's something that endures." The idea took root, and by the following spring, the O'Malleys had purchased 500 acres of prime River Valley land. They built a sturdy ranch house with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, offering views of both the river and the distant Red Cliffs. Xavier took to ranching with the same dedication he had shown in every aspect of his life, learning the business from neighboring ranchers and books ordered from back east. Emma continued to work part-time at the mine offices, gradually transitioning the operation toward its eventual closure. In 1885, their family grew again with the birth of their 3rd child, Michael Henry O'Malley, a quiet, thoughtful boy who seemed to absorb everything around him with his serious, dark eyes. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm of seasons, calving in the spring, moving the herd to summer pastures in the highlands, the fall roundup, and winter's relative quiet. The children grew, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, helping with chores as they got older, receiving their education from Emma in the evenings, and attending the small school in town when it was in session. Xavier's past as a gunslinger was a distant memory, though his reputation still occasioned whispers when new people came to the area. To most in the community, he was simply a successful rancher, a loving husband and father, a man who had found his place in the world. Yet there were moments, rare but significant, when glimpses of the man he had been surfaced. Like the time a group of rustlers targeted several ranches in the area, including the O'Malley spread. Xavier tracked them to their camp in the hills, and though he never spoke of exactly what happened there, the rustling stopped. The stolen cattle were returned, and Xavier came home with a bullet graze on his arm that he allowed Emma to tend without comment. Or the day 15-year-old Thomas came home bloodied from a fight in town, having defended the honor of a Mexican family newly arrived to work on a neighboring ranch. Xavier cleaned the boy's cuts, then took him to the barn for a different kind of lesson. Fighting isn't about being the strongest or the angriest, he told his son, showing him how to stand, how to throw a proper punch. It's about being the calmest, the most controlled, and it's always the last resort, not the first. Is that how you did it? Thomas asked. When you were, before. Xavier regarded his son thoughtfully. The boy had heard the stories, of course. In a small community, the past was never truly buried. Yes, he finally said, but I learned it too late and at too high a cost. I'm trying to help you learn it sooner. As the 19th century drew to a close, Silver Reef's glory days were long past. The last mine closed in 1891, the post office following a few years later. Many buildings were dismantled, their materials repurposed elsewhere. The boom town that had once boasted over 2,000 residents dwindled to a handful of families, but the O'Malley Ranch prospered. Xavier and Emma's careful management and diversification, adding sheep, growing alfalfa, breeding horses ensured their stability even through the economic panics that periodically swept the nation. Their children grew up and began to forge their own paths. Thomas, the eldest, had his father's sense of justice and his mother's head for business. After attending college in Salt Lake City, something neither Xavier nor Emma had been able to do, he returned to help run the ranch, eventually taking over its day-to-day operations. Catherine, independent and spirited, trained as a teacher and took a position at the school in St. George. She married the town doctor, a kind man named William Fraser, and gave Xavier and Emma their first grandchildren, twin boys who showed every sign of having inherited their grandmother's intelligence and their grandfather's quiet strength. Michael, the youngest, was drawn to the law. Perhaps it was hearing the story of how his parents met a tale that had become family legend. Or perhaps it was his inherent sense of fairness. He studied in Salt Lake City, and then San Francisco, returning to Utah as a lawyer with the territorial government, later serving as a judge after statehood was achieved in 1896. Through it all, the bond between Xavier and Emma remained the steady center of the family. They weathered the challenges of building a life together, disagreements over how to raise the children, financial worries during difficult years, the inevitable losses that come with time, with the same determination they had shown when facing down a corrupt sheriff and mine owner all those years ago. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, long after Silver Reef had become a ghost town and the world had changed in ways they could never have imagined in their youth, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch to celebrate. Thomas proposed a toast. To my parents, who taught us all what it means to stand for what's right, to love deeply, and to build something that lasts. Xavier, his dark hair now silver but his eyes still clear and sharp at 70, raised his glass to Emma. At 63, she remained beautiful to him, the lines on her face telling the story of a life fully lived. To the bookkeeper who stole my heart, he said softly, and the life we built together. Emma's eyes shone with tears as she clinked her glass against his. To the cowboy who stood between me and injustice, she replied, and gave me a love story better than any I could have imagined. Later, as the evening cooled and the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset paint the distant cliffs in shades of gold and crimson, Xavier and Emma slipped away for a private moment by the river that had nourished their land for 4 decades. You ever think about that day? Emma asked, her hand warm in his as they stood watching the water flow past. When you rode into Silver Reef and found me hiding behind the bar at the Silver Dollar, Xavier smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. Only every day, he admitted. I thank whatever fate or providence led me there. I was so afraid, Emma remembered, not just of being arrested, but of losing everything I'd worked for. I never imagined that day would lead to all of this. She gestured toward the ranch house where their family's laughter drifted on the evening breeze. Xavier pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. That day, I was just a man trying to do the right thing, he said. I didn't know I was finding my future. Our future, Emma corrected gently. Xavier nodded, his throat tight with emotion as he surveyed the life they had built from that chance meeting in a dusty mining town, now long forgotten by most of the world. Our future, he agreed. The best one I could have hoped for. As twilight deepened into night, they walked back toward the house, arm in arm, their steps sure on the path they had walked together for so many years. Behind them, Silver Reef existed only in memory and in the story that had brought them together, the tale of a sheriff who came to lock her up on false charges, and the cowboy who stood between them.